Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. Today, we're taking a different look at innovation through the lens of our federal government. It's not a walk we take very often, but it's one that moves me, and I think it's one that moves lots of people on this call when we start with the purview of the VA. And for my international listeners, the VA here is our Veterans Administration. It is the group that administers benefits and services to all those who have served in the United States Armed Forces. And it's a very integral part of how services are offered to people who have served, and oftentimes sets a model and a stage for how other countries look at managing veterans affairs. And we also learn and innovate within our own military and federal government systems. And I think it's important to look at those and what we can take away from those learnings wherever it is that we innovate. And that's why I'm really excited to have with me today Allison Amrhein, who is the director of the VHA Innovators Network. And as the director of operations, Allison guides a team of incredible innovation specialists from VA medical centers across the country through operational day-to-day functions, as well as leading operational strategic planning for the VHA Innovators Network. Her particular areas of leadership and responsibility include financial maintenance and planning, internal VA communications, as well as relationship building, developing the value metrics, and the oversight of data collection and management of the annual Spark Seed Spread Innovation Investment Program application and its review process. Prior to her role as Director of Operations, Allison served as an innovation coordinator managing high-value innovation projects and contracts, as well as the Director of Executive Correspondence for the Office of the Undersecretary for Health for Operations and Maintenance during her tenure as VA. That is a mouthful. And prior to joining the VA, she was a health systems researcher and technical writer for a number of nonprofit organizations. And as a person who practiced public health without the master's degree, I'm excited to have a real practitioner in the room who's talking not just about the administration of public health duties, but also how we innovate them. So Allison, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's such an important part of our innovation infrastructure that we don't talk about. We think of the tech sector, or maybe even the healthcare sector, or frankly, we've had guests on who we think of where innovation comes from. It's anything from online gambling and gaming, right, to art and all of its forms that might be driving innovation. Typically, we think of the federal government as laggards, as left behind, as being left with taxpayer-funded initiatives that we only get to hear about on the news when they don't work. And frankly, that is not the case. Having worked in the federal system, but also really getting a glimpse at those who are so deeply in need and those who are so deeply served, it's really important that we think about innovation, especially in the places where you work. So tell us why and how you got into innovating at the VA to begin with. How did this all come about?
It's been a very haphazard journey, not necessarily a straight line, a bit curvier than that. I started working in the VA, as you mentioned, in a number of different roles. There were even more acronyms and like long terms there that
it's an alphabet soup
that aren't even covered.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I kind of was detailed into helping out the innovation program years ago within VHA, as it was in a different form. And from just helping them out, years later, I came back and said, do y'all have any jobs I might be qualified for that I could apply for? Because I really enjoyed that time. And that happens a lot in the VA. You get detailed around, you have a special other duties as assigned. It happens a lot in the federal government. And they said, sure. And that was my first introduction to innovation at the VA in particular, and my first introduction to innovation anywhere other than the innovations that we know on a daily basis. Like you said, innovation comes in all forms, and there are multiple definitions for innovation. There are different types of innovation. Everyone seems to have one. And And so the work I was doing there as an innovation coordinator was working on kind of top-down industry partnership development. A lot of it was software or special kind of specific items that were more tech focused. And we were taking those ideas from the top and trying to develop and implement them within the healthcare systems throughout the country. And it wasn't always wildly successful. In fact, there was another arm of this innovation program that had a grassroots section to it where they were taking employee ideas and pushing those forward. And far more of those were successful and are still up and running within VA than the other way around. So it was a good lesson for me to learn end users are to innovating. And this is an innovation program outside research in VA. VA's research innovation is historic and kind of iconic. Transplants, nicotine patch, pacemaker. These are tremendously valuable things that have changed millions of lives throughout the world, right? And VA was the forefront in all of that in the research program. And what the innovation program has always done is try to be a bit different in its approach. And so,
Wait, can we name those one more time?
nicotine patch.
The pacemaker.
Yeah. And honestly, I can't remember if it's, I think it's the heart. I'm 99% sure it was the heart transplant. Like, one of the first done at VA. So we've always been
a ton of like PTSD related research that's really at the cutting edge that's taking place with the VA as well.
Yes. If you have PTSD, if you have a traumatic brain injury or need a prosthetic, I would want to go to the VA because that is something that we put a lot of resource into over many years. And it's so specific. The needs of veterans are so specific. That's what makes VA care, I think, particularly amazing, is because VA providers are taught and kind of learn the whole picture of someone because that military background is so unique and sets off many different mental, physical, and emotional health kind of concerns, and just a very different lifestyle and background to take into consideration. And I think that's what makes the VA very different, is that is what we do. And we have very specialized care in doing a lot of niche kind of things. And we incorporate those into primary care and taking care of the veteran.
So important. So this role, right? Can you tell us a little bit about the network itself and what it means to have this Veterans Innovation Network?
Yes. So years ago, kind of all the innovation programs within VHA kind of merged together. And the Innovators Network was kind of created from this giant human-centered design fellowship project. A presidential innovation fellow did this project about frontline employee innovation, or what are the problems with innovation in VA. And frontline employees said, well, what we really need is a space to innovate. We need a community. We need the opportunity to be heard because we're not always heard. And so from that, this Innovators Network was born. And then circle back years later, it has grown tremendously. It has changed and evolved. And the main thing that has always stayed with it is that it's about the frontline employee. It has veered much more towards that as of late, because we saw the value that participants from our programming really received was the community, was the kind of the network itself of having like-minded people to talk to solve problems with, and the learning and education and the empowerment that they felt by someone just saying yes. It wasn't so much the success of their solution, it was, or the idea that they had that they were developing, it was the success of themselves and how they felt about themselves. And that has kind of guided our path as we've evolved. And so the Innovators Network is an opt-in program available to any Veterans Health Administration healthcare system or medical center. So any one of our hospitals, which is 170-ish. And we have about 40 of those hospitals that have opted in now. The basic requirement is you need to be able to staff the program locally with an innovation specialist. This person is taught how to facilitate human-centered design. They also teach our 4 fundamentals, which are human-centered design, building your innovation strategy, as well as prototyping and iteration, and storytelling and pitching. And so they teach these classes, they facilitate these classes, they facilitate the doing of those things, right? It's one thing to teach, it's one thing to actively do HCD. It's one thing to actually be able to give feedback on somebody's prototype and kind of teach how to perform user experience testing and all those things. And then honestly, they are the sounding board for the front line. They're like mini therapists. They have a lot of people coming to them with problems. Essentially, that is what people come to them initially with, is because we ask for problems. We don't ask for solutions. We don't ask for ideas. We want the problem. And then we want to teach you how to create a solution that will solve that problem. And so they hear a lot and talk a lot about what's going on the front lines, what employees and what veterans are experiencing. And they're in charge of their programs locally, which kind of all feed up together into this Innovators Network and this national group of sites and innovators. And we also offer services to the entire VA. So we have programming in the fall and spring. And so it's usually attended by thousands of frontline employees, and we teach them our fundamentals as well. We have a program that connects industry and entrepreneurs with the VA called the Greenhouse Initiative. That began in post-COVID world, and it's been tremendously valuable to both parties. We allow industry to come in with their just budding solution, so something that isn't on the market, and we provide veterans and VA employees we provide them in a safe space to give feedback to the products that are being developed. And the external innovators iterate based on our feedback. And so it allows people to get involved in the process of innovation within the VA. And then it, of course, allows for a nice group of users for the external folks. So we do a little bit of everything, but it's the most constant. Our constant is the frontline employee.
Yeah. And that's what it really has to be, right? Because I mean, you're a direct service organization. It's not like this is something that is happening esoterically or philosophically. This is stuff that's actually getting done. And so I'm curious, can you share with us some of the projects that you've been working on, and certainly some of the stories that you shared in order to get people on board with those projects?
Yeah, so that's a big part of storytelling, is a big part of kind of how we take people in, right? They have to pitch to us. They pitch their problem and they pitch why they care about it. So we hear a lot about their passion and their drive.
So who's doing the pitching, just to clarify?
The
who are the players on the table?
The employees, so everyone from someone who sweeps the floors at the hospital to someone who performs a heart transplant.
Wow.
Can participate in our program. We look at everybody in the same vein. And so they have to pitch to their leadership to participate in our program, particularly the Spark Seed Spread Innovation Investment and Accelerator program you mentioned from my bio. And then we hear their stories throughout, because we ask in their applications to this program, why do you care about this? Because it's their stories that make people connect with their work, and it makes them, it gives them that drive. They're doing more work, right? They're not getting time separate to do this often, the work that they need to do with their prototyping or their interviewing and doing discovery. And as they're developing these things, they are taking more time to do them. So these people are amazing. So we have a couple really powerful storytellers. One group we have is creating kind of a lockbox, if you will, for firearms, where it has a number of things integrated into the lockbox. So if you are going to take out your weapon and you feel that you are going to take your life. They're creating very personalized storage boxes for firearms with photos, with voice recordings of your family members, and a number of things that are going to try to get you to step back from that. And the individuals who have created this are the veteran himself and really emotionally attached. The innovation is called now Reasons for Living Lockbox. And it's this innovator, it's his individual experience that has driven him to create this Reasons for Living lockbox. He's doing it in partnership with, it's a gentleman named Carl LaFaro and Natalie Thomas. And he was noticing, he's a mental health professional, and he noticed that many suicidal veterans reconsidered their plans after thinking about a happier time. And so as the idea for a firearm lockbox already exists, but if you hear Carl talk about it, he'll say that they're sterile or they're kind of boring and they're very traditional. And so the Reasons for Living lockbox puts happy memories into it as a veteran tries to access their firearm. They're going to be met with some barriers. Even I think they're adding smells to it this year.
How do they do that?
Yeah, they do it through who knows. I don't get the details. I often am like, you guys figure that out. That is what the innovation specialist is for. I am here to say yes and let them play around with it. Maybe it doesn't work. Right. But I know they have photos, recordings, and they've even said if your favorite candy is M&Ms, they put some M&Ms in there. But the guiding question, if you hear Carl talk about this and you hear Natalie, their guiding question, and this is what's really important, what we teach in the Innovators Network, is how might we create a tool for a veteran at high risk of suicide to choose life? And we want to make their environment for living safer. And he's very dedicated. Natalie is so dedicated. And it's really from experience, both as a frontline employee in a mental health capacity, as well as a veteran, Carl himself. So that is one of many, but it's a really important one.
Critical, right? I mean, wow. So
it's
important.
A huge problem still in VA. It's a sad number that we look for every year, the number of veterans who die by suicide. And it's the highest priority for VA. And we utilize a lot of our resources in the Innovators Network to support innovations around that effort as well.
Here. Wow. And it sounds like it's also veterans solving veterans problems.
Yes.
Which is really unique just from a design thinking standpoint, right? And how we really think about our audiences and who we're trying to serve and making sure we have the right people around the table to solve those problems in a way that's
yes,
sure.
Yep. We have a huge percentage VA employees are veterans. And so it's a double whammy there of the frontline employee, but also a veteran. Veterans often listen to other veterans more so than they would listen to me, which makes sense. I'm not upset. I get it. And they come into the VA for that community as well. And so it's nice to have an extra kind of in for them to talk to a veteran who's also an employee.
Wow. And so that's one project. And then give us a little bit of advice too, from your perspective of what's worked and what doesn't work when people are trying to pitch you on these ideas, but also you escalating these ideas and determining how you implement, how you approve them, and then scale them inside an organization as vast as the VA. And can you give my listeners a sense of just how big the VA network is that you're working with?
Yeah, so around 170 hospitals. We have 40 in our network, and there are about, I think the latest is, it changes obviously all the time, but I think we're around 300,000 employees within VA. And most of the employees are VHA specific. So they're working in the healthcare sector of the VA. The VA has the benefits administration, the cemeteries administration, and the health administration. And the health administration is by far the biggest. And so it's a big scope, and it's fairly segmented. Unfortunately, there's big joke about you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA, and it's not exactly untrue. And so getting it from one step to the next often takes a long time. It takes a lot of stories. And so when I'm going to put myself on the line to try to elevate something and tell people that it's worthwhile and have to tell that story and have to pitch it, I do exactly what we teach people in the Innovators Network. I hit it hard with some personal, passionate, qualitative, if you're looking at data terms, hit them with a story first and foremost, an experience that you've had, a veteran story, your own story. Those are the ones that paint a better picture and get people to care, because that's how you get somebody to move forward. That's how you get someone's attention, is that they need to care. And I have found over the years that more people care emotionally than they do appears with data or numbers. Having both are great.
Are a must, one might say, for us innovators.
Yes, for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they need both. But start out with that problem and tell the problem through the eyes of someone who has experienced it, if it's you, if it's whomever. And then if you have data to support the kind of vastness of that problem or the impact of that problem, like a percentage of this many veterans are at risk for suicide, this many are receiving whatever care, whatever your metric might be, doesn't matter what it is. Adding that does help. It helps to show the scope of the problem. And then if it's somebody who everything we do in the Innovators Network is super early stage. So we're not yet implementing anything that we could show return on investment, et cetera. That's done kind of later on in the game. But we can see return on our investment when the things that are scaled and are implemented more broadly and sustained at a number of sites, they tend to come from our sites more than not, because we've probably created them over years well with people from the front lines, with end users. And so the things that come out of the Innovators Network that are successful, they tend to work better, right? So that proves our return on investment, because that's what we see the most. And then we've had people say that they stayed working for VA because of our program. We've had people say that they stayed in healthcare because of our program and things like that. When I pitch something up, I give those quotes, I tell the stories, I try to add some data, and I lead with what's best for people and what's best for human beings. I don't think because something, and I will say this in a pitch, if somebody asks me, how much money do you think this will save us? I'll be like, I don't know right now. We'll have to see how much, but I can tell you that it will make people's lives easier. And so however you want to calculate that, I'll figure it out. Or that it's the right thing to do because it might actually cost more. And I'll say that as well. A solution that we have is in development as well is around device to help kyphotic veterans. So very slumped over veterans that have kyphosis in their spine. It's to help them in radiology. So as they get an MRI, right now it's very difficult because their body won't stabilize and people have to be flat, obviously. And so they're putting pillows. They can't lay flat. Correct. Because their spine is too hunched, and they're putting pillows and they're putting blankets, or somebody's propping them, or they're putting whatever they can find, which is the standard of care anywhere, under their body to try to get them to lay flat. All of those things are available in the hospital now: blankets, pillows, etc. The device that's being developed by a gentleman out of Cincinnati, his name's Kevin Johnson, is a wedge that is placed under the veteran and then is pumped up to kind of match their height and their spine and to make them even. And yes, it's something we'd have to put money into developing. It's something that we'd have to purchase, and it's not just laying around. So it might initially cost more money to use that rather than pillows or whatever. But I'm sure over the long run, the folks that do implement and diffuse, they'll be able to see that it takes less time for a provider to perform the MRI, which is a savings. And then there's a dignity factor of having pillows shoved under and around you rather than just a nice device that will get you where you need. And I think that matters as well. So there's a lot of ways.
And it has potential commercialization opportunities too.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it could be the next patch. It could be the next.
It is patented. We have a number of things that the program itself used to be very program driven. So it used to be a program that you could implement within the hospital. We had lots of success with some programs, one called Pride in All Who Served, which was about treating and how to properly kind of talk to and speak and treat LGBTQ plus veterans, and that was very successful. But it was a program. Over the last few years, we've seen the number of products, like physical, tangible products, like the kyphotic wedge, like the Reasons for Living lockbox, many more pop up. And that's very different and very new. And it's a new challenge that we're having to try to solve to get these to the place where our partners in tech transfer can patent them and license them, and we can get them manufactured broadly, which is a whole other hugely complicated thing that I didn't think I would ever have anything to do with in my career. And here I am. So we still face challenges every day. And I've had to pitch a lot of those products to get support because they haven't been tested. And I'll find a way to tell the story of that person or put yourself in the place of that veteran that comes in with kyphosis. And once you do that, once you tell a story, it's very powerful and you can get a lot of support with a good story.
From your lips, frankly, from both of our lips to my listeners' ears.
Yeah.
And just some tips for my listeners on how to do this effectively when you're really trying to incorporate the emotional side of the story. We advocate a lot here at Innovation Storytellers with empathy mapping. So the time to think about what is actually influencing my listening audience.
Yes.
Maybe they're very moved by a veteran's story. Maybe that's primary. Maybe what's primary is numbers first. And if you have a very data-driven, operationally centric CFO budget kind of person, you might want to start with numbers and then move into your more human story. You might want to do this from a first person if you are the veteran themselves, right? Or if you are the innovator who's experienced the issue that you're addressing, start with I. But most importantly, start with why.
Yep.
And that means, what is my cause, my purpose, my belief? What do I believe? And so even if you don't start with the human soldier story, in this case, you can start off with why is this so critical? Imagine the indignity, imagine the opportunity, imagine the anxiety or the worry about that person before they get there. And what can we do to ameliorate and solve that problem, right? So start with the why. And if you're at a total loss still, take a look at those core values that live in the employee handbook or live at the mission statement at your elevator if you've forgotten it, and take people back to the reason why they do what they do. Because in theory, if you're working at a large organization, everyone around you supposedly shares that mission and the vision and the values of the organization. Include them in the language. Because then even if you don't have that perfect Soldier Brown, who needs this desperately, you can relate to what everyone who works in the company needs desperately to be successful and harken back to those. So you can incorporate all of those elements into your storytelling to get your listeners, as skeptical as they might be, on the same page. Because in theory, you're all marching into a collective future together. And if you can get people on board with that as the foundation, then you're ready to go. Such powerful story. Correct. And I shared with Allison before we hopped on this call that my best friend from high school, while I was off hitchhiking in Central America on my junior year abroad, my best friend from high school joined the Army and volunteered to go to the first Gulf War. And while she was there, incurred some injury from Gulf War syndrome and wound up losing her life this year and was in the hospice at the VA. She and I had lost contact for 20 years from our time in high school, and reunited after many years when I found out that she was sick. And I spent every Saturday for 2 months in the VA with her, sipping on milkshakes and reminiscing about our time together. But most of all, we both marveled at the incredible care that the nurses and the staff, I mean, even the custodial staff at the VA were so kind and warm at hospice that I wound up bringing them milkshakes every week when my friend and I would be reminiscing about our old times when we were 17 at the diner, smoking cigarettes and drinking milkshakes because we were super healthy. And we have a billion bodies that could, frankly.
Yes.
But in any event, so this is a special reason for this interview is my lovely friend, Christine Regan, who I still miss desperately. So thank you for sharing this innovation, because I think what people forget is the opportunity to innovate is everywhere. And the fact that we even talk about this grandiose idea of democratizing innovation, when the VA starts off with the premise of democracy at its core, because the only need for innovation to be part of this innovation cycle is working at the VA or having served, right? And everybody, even your external partners, buy into this. Everybody's an innovator concept. I think it's so important. And I think it's a lesson that all of us need to relearn on a regular basis in our sometimes ivory towers of innovation, that everyone has capacity to innovate.
And it doesn't have to be people automatically go with technology. I think when they hear innovation at first, neither of the things that I mentioned are particularly technologically focused. And I would say most of our solutions they're not fancy. They solve problems. That's what matters. Some of them are, some of them aren't, and it's okay. And my tip for pitching and telling to your audience, like, and the empathy mapping is exactly what I tell people all the time. Know who your audience is and know what will sell it to them in particular. And if you don't have any clue what that is, ask them before why don't you just ask them and say, what would show you value in this? How can I prove value? And then see if you can find it. See if you can find an answer. Prepare yourself to do so. Why guess? Why just assume something about someone and why they make decisions? Because you don't know. Just ask them. You'll have a much better chance of actually meeting their value statements and what they hold as valuable if you just ask them. But yeah,
who'd have thought? You mean asking the user what they want?
Asking the person you're pitching, like you're pitching to your boss and you don't really know your boss. You don't know if they're a numbers person or if they care about this number or that number or a story. Be like, this is what I'm doing. How can I prove its value to you? Because you know it's valuable based on what your thoughts and opinions are. Get the thoughts and opinions of who you're pitching and telling the story to. It can be that simple.
And I'm going to make available empathy maps, the one I use with my clients every time that we start off this process of creating the story, to make that helpful for everyone. Allison, I need to now ask you the 3 hot seat questions that every one of my guests answers when they come on the show. So if you had the opportunity to participate in any innovation in the course of human history, where would you, well, let me ask you this. What do you think is the greatest innovation of all time?
I go with this as a unusual choice, but I go with it every time. I straight up go with the tampon.
Oh my God.
Tampon, maybe it's the feminist in me, I don't know, but the ability for women to kind of have a choice in what they want to do with their care is lovely. They might be comfortable using different things, but B, just allowed them to do more. It allows you to be a little bit more free, and I'm here for it. For it. So that's my favorite. Again, not technological.
Yes, technological. That whole, there's engineering involved in that.
Oh, yes.
And why Tampax has all the patents on that too.
Yes,
right?
there's not a wire or a coding system involved.
Thank God.
That we think of like that. I know.
That would get scary.
It'll probably come. They're going to try to put it in there because that's what happens, is they try to complicate things that don't need to be complicated, I feel like sometimes, but
that's how they're going to track your menstrual cycle going forward, right? They're just going to put it right into the tampon, so you don't have to think about it anymore.
Maybe that's what they'll do. I don't know. I'll go with it, just straight up tampon. Best
Fantastic. One. And so if you had the chance to work on any innovation team in the course of human history, what would that be?
I feel like Maybe it's because I'm watching the Apollo 13 documentary on Netflix right now, and I grew up in the space shuttle generation, but I feel like sending the first man to the moon would have been a pretty cool team of innovators to work with. I think that's a monumental. It never gets old. I never get tired of watching documentaries about space flight. I have no desire to do it, and I'm not particularly engineeringly blessed or mathematically blessed, or I wasn't in the middle. I'm not a fighter pilot, but I don't really have a desire to go into space. But the fact that that was all done, particularly in that time frame, in that era in time, I think is amazing. And I love hearing about everyone had a role in that. To me, they were all innovators. Anyone, the people that sterilized equipment were innovators. Everyone, obviously the human computers, the ladies in the computer room, they're geniuses. I mean, everybody in that initial time frame was just would have been a difficult place to work, but it would be cool.
Right. It's amazing to me that those women from the movie Hidden Figures were, their title was computer.
Yep.
It's just awesome that how far we've come, right? Where the human, right? At some point, some human was called can opener, right? And now we actually have them. I think there's a whole comedic set to be played out from that. And the last question I have is, what's something you wish would be innovated that has not been yet? Something that really pisses you off and annoys you, or something you just wish would make everybody else's life better?
Oh gosh, I would probably be here for more biomedical breakthroughs would probably be mine. Either that or like teleportation. Like why there's still so much, obviously medical technology, biomedical technology has come very far, obviously, like amazingly far. But I think about, my maternal grandmother had breast cancer and died at like 36. My mom was 8 years old. And yes, now probably would have been caught sooner. She could have lived longer, but why is it such a hard thing still? Why have we not nailed that one? And then why can't I just hop over to Europe instead of having that like 8 hour flight? Like, why can't we do that? Those would be my two. It's like I want to get somewhere faster, and I want to be able to make people healthier, or just make the process a little easier and less painful for them and their families, to be fair. So those would be the two I would wish for.
Yeah, as someone who just booked a 26-hour flight to Indonesia, I feel you.
No, thank you. Can't, I mean, I need to be in like business class, but I don't make business class money. So there's the conundrum. But yeah, I think 13 hours was my longest from LA to Auckland. But I was like 20 something years old. My now body would be very upset, I think, at that. But it's brutal.
Well, Allison Amrhein, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they're welcome to just email me. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, but email me. It's just my name with a dot in between, allison.amrhein@va.gov. And we're here to collaborate to make things better for veterans. So I like to hear from people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.